Hello, everyone. Sorry about that. I thought I had a phone call. It's actually not until 11:30 my time. So I had my wires crossed, but we are now good to go. So welcome to the Buddhist PhD Ask Me Anything Buddhist PhD Live. So in these open Q&A sessions, what I like to do is take audience questions. The way that it works. Hello, welcome back. Yes. So the way that it works is typically what I try to do is just go through the order of the chat and answer the questions as they come in. And I'll be able tonight. I do have a hard cutoff at 11, probably 11:25, because I have to get ready for a call that I have with Neil Ripsky. But other than that, I am here to answer your questions in the order they come in the chat. The only exception to this is because, as I'm putting in the chat now, this whole activity only survives because of donations. Those people who send through either a super chat or something to the Venmo, something to the PayPal, I will be putting ahead of the line. So if you do put something through ahead of the line, please do let me know. Okay? Right. Now, let's get into it. So, uh yeah, Hans, sorry about that. I had a little bit of a false start. I had a bit of a panic attack because I'm dealing with people in so many different time zones. I was like, wait a minute, isn't that call at 9:30? I'm already late. Okay. So, looking at the questions in the chat, let's jump right in. So, Tim Bogan asks, Vishnu is known an emanation of is known as an emanation of Avalokiteshvara. Does this mean that the realm of Vaikuntha could be known as a pure land of Avalokiteshvara? Okay. You know, I don't spend too much time thinking about those things. Um, it's been said that the Buddha was an emanation of Shiva or Vishnu or both, or that in one lifetime he was Rama, or like there's all sorts of things. I think mainly this stuff is just because people want the Buddha to be Hindu, or they want the Buddha to be Christian, or they want, like everyone tries to make Jesus into a bodhisattva, and then this tries to say, well, Jesus is teaching all the same things as the Buddha, and or vice versa, the Buddha is teaching the same things as Jesus. But the closer you look at these things, they just kind of fall apart. Like even on the Hindu side, for example, when they say, well, the Buddha was an emanation of such and such deity from the Hindu canon, and you ask them, oh, okay, well then can you show me how he taught things that are in line with the canon? And they say, oh no, he was an emanation that was there to confuse people and pull them away from the true teachings. That's why he came. Oh, okay, so you're saying he taught something completely different. It's like okay, whatever, fine, he can be an emanation of whatever you want if you're saying that he's teaching something completely different from what the tradition teaches. It's like okay. So I wish I had a better answer for that, Tim. I just don't spend too much time thinking about it, because how could you possibly know? At the end of the day, you just have to look at what they're teaching and decide, are these things the same or are they different? And if they're different, in what ways are they different? And how important are those differences to practice? And, that's what's important. Okay. So Jay asks about making progress on the path and how it is that having less negative emotions is a sign of progress. Well, yeah. If you look at the boomies, if you look at the process of going from an ordinary being to an extraordinary being, headed towards nirvana or enlightenment after nirvana, right? So this flow chart from climbing the ladder up to nirvana, into non-abiding nirvana, up to Buddhahood, right? Both major schools of Buddhism say you have to attain nirvana. One school says that once you attain nirvana, the Theravada school says once you've attained nirvana, you enter into nirvana, and that's basically the end of the road for you. The Mahayana says, well, no, actually, there's another option, which is that you've broken the 12 links. The 12 links are now broken. So you will never be born under the under the power of karma, ignorance, and so forth ever again. So now, under your own will, under your own decision, you can use compassion, for example, to be reborn solely for the benefit of others. But your mind, because you've broken the 12 links, will still be in nirvana. Your mind can't be disturbed, exactly in the same way that an arahant who hasn't yet entered into perinirvana, right, who has nirvana with remainder, has a mind that's fully in nirvana, but a body that's basically still here in samsara, right, is the way they would describe it, in a sense. In a similar way, a bodhisattva or a Buddha enters into non-abiding nirvana according to the Mahayana canon and carries on benefiting beings. Of course, a big distinction is we would say that, at some point they're not using karma in the same way that we would be using karma. They have purified actions, and the results that they are I don't know, the impressions and so forth in their mind that they're using to generate new experiences and realities are not karmas anymore. It's just using the creative force of mind that generates entire universes, according to karmic theory, with much more control, much more skill, and with no influence from ignorance and delusion. Okay, so anyways, to wind it all the way back, on your way to nirvana, you're removing first very, very coarse negative emotions, very, very obvious negative emotions, and then less and less obvious ones, all the way up until you've removed the subtlest ones, and then you enter nirvana. So one of the signs of progress that you're progressing down the path is that your negative emotions have less power, less force, and that your positive emotions that benefit the path and incidentally also benefit other beings have more and more power, more and more force. Is it a fair simplification to say the eradication of suffering is the Buddha's goal? I think it's worth unpacking a little more than that, because suffering is the problem we're trying to remove, but we're also talking about not just the removal of stuff, we're talking about the accumulation of good qualities also. So we're adding and subtracting. Okay. Explain duality and non-duality in simple terms. Okay. Right. Sorry, just checking over here in the other chat. Okay, so duality and non-duality. Duality means, to put it in sort of Western terms, according to cognitive science, you're not seeing this cup. You've never seen a cup in your life. What you see is basically your eyeball gets stimulated by photons, by light, particles of light. Your mind, in neurology terms, they would say your brain, but I'm a Buddhist. So your mind is processing this information and it generates a visual image in your mind. That visual image is what you experience. You don't experience seeing the cup. You experience a visual image generated by your mind based upon the eye organ being stimulated in a certain way. And interestingly, even if you just stared at this cup for a while, you'd find that the same stimulation, the same type of stimulation to the eye, when processed differently by the mind, produces a different image. So some of you have done my opening the sense gates practice, and you found that when you pool all your awareness on the visual sense, you see light. You see white light everywhere, gold light everywhere, things are glowing. The world looks very different when you can pool a lot of your bandwidth of awareness onto vision. So when there's a ton of bandwidth being put into the visual processing part of your mind, let's say, the way that the image appears changes. Does that make sense? So it's not like you're just seeing the world. The world that you see is a product of how your mind has processed the stimulation that it's gotten from the world. That's what you see, not the actual world. So non-duality or duality means when you look at this cup, and we all do this, you look at this cup and you think, I just walked into the room, the cup was here. This cup has nothing to do with me, right? This cup is out there in the world. It's over here somewhere. It's not even in the same country as you. uh, has nothing to do with you, right? That's how it seems, that you're over here somewhere, the cup is over there somewhere, and you're two completely different things that have nothing to do with each other, or very little to do with each other. Non-duality, not two, means that just like with cognitive science, you can see directly or know directly in your experience that the mind that is having the experience and the experience itself are tied together like this. So that the mind and the object can't actually be pulled apart. In a sense, your part of this cup would go away if you died. Nobody sees this aspect of the cup except for you. The aspect I'm seeing isn't the aspect you're seeing. Is this making sense? And when you train, for example, opening the visual sense gate, and you remove the conceptual activity, because there's a layer of conceptual activity that makes your mind go, I'm over here, and the cup is over there, and we're totally different things that have nothing to do with each other. There's part of your mind that makes the knower and the object look like this, even though both of these hands are connected to my body, right? When you train in concentration, that layer of conceptuality that divides the two goes away, and you see it like this, and you go, oh, they can't actually be pulled apart. Not two. Obviously, my mind doesn't have to see the cup. So it's not like my mind and the cup are one. They're not one thing, but they're also not two things. So this is called a relationship of entity, where two things can't actually be pulled apart, but they're not the same thing. So that's not two-ness. By the way, as far as I understand, that's the meaning of Advaita too, not two, right? Non-dual. Right. Okay. Next question. Can you talk a bit of? Oh, sorry. Let me land the plane a little bit more. We're on the runway, but let's disembark this particular plane. Non-duality is a beginner's experience. Non-duality is the entryway to training. One of the entryways to training. It's not an advanced experience. So for me, when I see all these people talking about non-duality as if it's the most important thing in the world, and as if it's the end all be all, and as if it's the end of the road, and that if you can do this, now you're a great being, it makes me really sad, because if somebody was training an hour a day, I could have them generating those experiences in like a month or two. So it's the beginning. It's the very beginning of actual experience of how things are. And it will be unbelievably profound to you when it happens, because it's not even that level. Things are not at all how you expected them to be. On the other hand, that's the very beginning, the very entryway, the very start of real stuff. You are so far from being a great being at that point, it's not even funny. And so the people who go into a retreat for a couple of days, or they do a few hours of meditation, and they have these kinds of experiences, and then go on the internet and say that Mahamudra, Dzogchen, Advaita Vedanta, Hindu practice, Jain practice, Christian mysticism, like everything under the sun is actually just the non-duality experience that I had after 2 hours of practice. It all just boils down to this incredible experience that me, this great being, had. And it's all like this. And by the way, buy my course. Right? That will ruin your practice, because you will, if you're like that, you won't seek out the systems, including, I think, Advaita Vedanta and these other systems of training that actually take you down a pathway that begins there and ends thousands of miles from there. So it's pretty important that you have those experiences, and that I say this sometimes, and I don't know if it sounds arrogant or not. Hopefully it doesn't sound arrogant, but give me just a moment. I've now generated a non-dual experience of vision, and it took about 3 seconds, and now it's back to normal. And now there's bliss running through my body, and it doesn't look like anything. Right? It looks totally normal from the outside. And it doesn't make me a great being. It makes me someone who's trained a little bit in concentration. This is like a basic skill you should have. This is why I call it a foundation. This is a basic skill you should have as a meditator, being able to generate non-dual awareness with each of your senses. Because if you can't do that, you can't do the more profound stuff of training. I mean, doing that for 2 seconds, there's literally bliss running through the center of my body. It's running down my arms. It's running into the tips of my fingers. It feels fantastic. But outside, it doesn't look like anything. It doesn't give me access to any kind of special knowledge, really, beyond the fact that I know that that there's not a me in the way that it seems between the visual thing and the thing being seen, but between the visual consciousness and the thing being seen. Right? So this is an entry experience. This is a beginning. This is the equivalent of intensive breath practice for real concentration training. So the reason I'm spending so much... Doc's been having trauma from Discord. I don't know. Hold on. I just saw the bottom of the chat. So it's really, really important that this sinks in, and that as you make your way out onto the internet tonight or tomorrow or the next 10 years, and you see these sorts of people, or if you're one of these people, that you realize this is the beginning. That for capable meditators, being able to do that is like, it's like you waking up in the morning and putting your pants on. Do you understand? And again, I really hope this doesn't sound arrogant, but to me, that doesn't seem like an advanced capability. It's just a normal part of my day that I do that all the time with all sorts of things. And that's normal. This is just how your mind works if you train your mind. And it doesn't actually make you special. It's again, it's like breathing, as Neil said on the podcast, I think a while back. He goes, what did he say? He was like, oh, you learned your ABCs and now you can read words. Great. Like all your work is ahead of you now. And it might sound a little bit arrogant to some of you. I really hope it doesn't. But the only reason I think it sounds that way is because you don't believe me that it's so easy. But if you train in the right techniques, I guarantee you, if you put in an hour a day, these things will be happening to you within a couple of months if you're using the right techniques. Maybe like 6 months on the outside. So this is really important to get. Really, really important to get. Otherwise, you'll have these experiences and then you will go off the path onto weird shit for years. And I've met these people. I know these people. I've seen them in spiritual Facebook groups and stuff for years. And my goodness, it's a shame. It's a shame because they've had enough experience that they could go somewhere with a teacher, with a lineage. They could go somewhere, but they're not going to because they've sabotaged themselves. It's really a shame. Okay. I'll do Druggin's question since he sent a super chat. For those of you who don't know, this channel only exists because of donations. So I go in the order of the chat, but when super chats come through, since that's the only reason I'm able to do this, is because of your generosity. I do the super chats out of order because the community owes them a debt for providing enough funds so that I can do this for free for everyone else. And I owe them a debt for the same reason. So super chats. And if you send through a donation to Venmo or PayPal, just let me know in the chat that you did so. And same thing, I'll put your question associated with that donation ahead of the chat. Okay. All right. So Drugan asks, what if you have negative emotions due to mental illness? Yeah, that's a great question. So that's sort of like I said in the video on mental illness and practice. Uh, if this is the spectrum of human wellness, and over here is completely dysfunctional, you have to be in an institution, and over here is, let's not say an enlightened being, but is like as best you can be, the far end of doing really, really well internally as a being. Okay. And this is the middle. This is where everybody is normally. And these are the far extremes. You with me? Buddhist training and most spiritual systems of training assume you're starting from here, that you're somewhere in this average range where the big bump is, where all the average people are, right, on a bell curve, that you're somewhere along this spectrum. Now, if you're not so bad that you need to be in an institution, but you're also not so good that you're at the bottom of this normal bell curve, you're over here somewhere in the abnormal psychology, do the stuff that we know works really well to get you back over here, even if it's the bottom end of normal. We all, even normal people, aren't normal, right? We're dysfunctional. According to Buddhist psychology, we're totally dysfunctional. But if you get therapy, if you have the right medications, etc., for whatever's ailing you, including bipolar disorder, including the research on this is fantastic. Go watch the video if you haven't seen it that I put up on the research about what meditation can do for people that have all sorts of things, from bipolar to PTSD to anxiety. If you basically, you name it, if you train in meditation in a lineage with people who know what they're doing, it can really help. But if you're over here somewhere outside that relatively normal range of dysfunction, then you won't be well enough to do the stuff that makes you more well. Is that making sense? Because you'll be so unstable, there won't be enough stability in your internal state to consistently and with enough force do those things that we are describing here in terms of training to make yourself even more well over the course of time. Now, let me give you an example that's the opposite of that. I have a good friend, had him, a good friend of many years. He trained with the same teacher I did in all of this stuff before my teacher died, trained in all this stuff for years with the same teacher. And he had bipolar disorder. And before he started training, he would have to take almost literally like a handful of pills every day to just function. And over the course of not a fast time, but with the help of his doctors and going back and forth with his doctors and his, I'm not sure what it's called, but like a pharmacologist or what have you, the not a therapist, but the type of therapist that deals in medications, going back and forth with them, I think over the course of like 10 years, 15 years, he reduced the stuff he takes down to a much smaller amount. So now he barely needs to take anything, relatively speaking. And that's happened over a long period of time where he made himself stable enough with medications and therapy so that he could do the work that makes you even more well in terms of your mental training. So now I would gather from talking to him and spending, whatever, that now he's more like over here. He's like, generally speaking, better than a lot of people are mentally because he's done a lot of training with his mind. Psychiatrist, thank you. So it takes time for these techniques to work, and you need enough stability in your personality and internal state to be able to make progress with it. And probably that's going to come from therapy and medication, not meditation, but taking things that balance you out. And that's fine. No problem. And then on top of that, what the research says with bipolar is that when you're down, you need a little bit of extra help and support to make sure it all holds together. That's the community, right? That's what the community is there for, is to help you help you hold it together when you're low. And then when you're up, the research says it's kind of interesting, right? When you're up, actually you have more energy, right? And so then quite often you can do more practice and stuff when you're you're feeling quite good than you would normally be able to do. So then you sort of work with yourself in that way, where when you're low, you do less practice and you sort of do what you can and you get as much support as you can. And then when you're up, you're doing more practice and training more and studying more because there's more energy there to do the stuff that you'd like to be doing. Okay, relationships. Why would we be in one or not? My great teacher, my great mentor used to say, your relationships are the crucible of your practice. Your relationships are the crucible of your practice. They're the testing ground of your practice. So if you're living in the real world and you have a husband, a wife, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, children, a dog, a cat, whatever, in addition to that, you have friends. In addition to that, you have your family. In addition to that, you have a boss or you have employees or both. This is the testing ground for how your practice is going. If your practice is going really well, then despite all of the ups and downs of the outside world, the mind will be more consistent. That doesn't mean you're like a stone that doesn't change. It just means that more, as we were saying before, more positive, virtuous motivations come up, less negative, non-virtuous motivations and intentions come up. And over the course of time, you're seeing yourself go like this, right? Instead of going like this. So that's really it, you know? Let's see. Okay, Andre, reincarnation, it goes back to the earliest Buddhist sources. So reincarnation / rebirth goes back to the very earliest sources in Buddhism. The Four Noble Truths already, right, first teaching, talks about rebirth. The 12 links of samsara, which is attached to the Four Noble Truths, right? These are the fundamental teachings of supposedly the oldest school of Buddhism, is a description of reincarnation. when the Buddha set out on his journey to train in something to overcome suffering, he saw an old person, a sick person, a dead person, and a shramana, a person who had renounced the world to seek some kind of greater, some sort of greater purpose, right? So the Buddha's promise was to overcome old age, sickness, and death. That's what he set out to do. Now, if rebirth wasn't a thing, all you would need to do as a person to overcome old age, sickness, and death is die. Am I right? If that was the end, once you're dead, no more old age, no more sickness, no more death. It's done. So this thing about overcoming old age, sickness, and death only makes sense if you're going to be born again. And it's only a big problem if being reborn is something that happens out of your control with a great deal of suffering and difficulty and so forth involved, right? Otherwise, it would just be a kind of a fun ride. All right. Let's see. Is it fair? Oh, Doc's been having trauma from Discord chat. What trauma? I don't know what trauma you're referring to. Okay. Shashank Singh. Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'd be happy to come on the channel and talk about Indian religions. If one of the admins would pop the Discord link into the chat, Shashank, just reach out to me on Discord, send me a personal message. Don't just put it in the group chat or something because it could get buried. Send me like a personal message through Discord and we'll set up a time. Yeah. I mean, I'll want to look a little bit at what you're doing just to make sure that it's, a good fit. But yeah, as long as it's a good fit, I'd be happy to do it. Anywhere you find human beings, I'm happy to go there. I think I've said before. Oh, did I? Sorry, Jay. Uh, I don't think I did, Jay. I talked about relationships. Oh no, that was the eradication of suffering. I talked about. I talked about the lessening of negative emotion. I don't think I missed anything, did I? Oh, I did. I see it. Sorry. Is it fair to say that our ordinary being state, we don't see others as they are, we see them as we are? Um, Not quite. I don't think that's fair to say because quite often we see others as we are not, don't we? You look at somebody and it's possible that you'll see them through a sort of a filter of what you think is possible, and you'll miss qualities they have because you don't know what they are and you impute something else. Like, for example, you look at a great bodhisattva whose mind is perfectly at peace all the time, but he makes a face like this, and you go, oh, that's anger. His mind's very disturbed. This guy doesn't know what he's doing. If he's getting angry, he must be a totally ordinary person, right? That's possible. That's entirely possible. On the other hand, maybe you look at a being like that and you see them behaving that way, and some part of you goes, wow, he looks sort of angry, but he's not doing what an angry person would do. The rest of his behavior, this is unusual because an angry person wouldn't be sort of helping people through that force that he's exerting. That's unusual, right? So it's possible that even with your limited perceptions and experiences and so forth, that if you're just sort of paying attention, you'll see things more as they are rather than simply your bias. Because there's a layer of perception first, and then you're layering stuff on top of it through concept and past experience and other things. Okay. All right, Shawshank. My channel is named Santani Dwa Dwaj Dwajavahak. Okay. Yeah. Just send me a message and we'll set something up. As long as it's a good fit, I'm happy. Like I said, so my thing is, like, unless the I don't know, National Satanist Conference of America wants me to go speak there or something, basically other than that, I'm happy to go talk to anybody, no matter what they believe and how much I might disagree with it. Because I want to go where people are and help human beings. So I don't have to agree with the people that I go spend time with on everything, as long as I can go there and make connections and say some things, and things happen. Okay. So Lang asks, the allegory of a turtle, a floating yoke, is sometimes met with dread. So many lives before enlightenment, so much can go wrong, and a new chance is extremely unlikely. No. Okay, think about this carefully. Why is the turtle blind? Why is the turtle blind? Because that particular turtle, in that circumstance, in that analogy, is a being who isn't doing anything deliberate to determine where they're going to be reborn, right? They're just popping up wherever they happen to pop up. You see it? So occasionally they do good deeds, and normally what happens when you pop up for air is you have a nice refreshing rebirth in the upper realms, like the heavenly realms or the human realm, a nice sort of refreshing breath of air, and then you go back down. So what are the odds, the Buddha is saying, that if you didn't deliberately look for that yoke and basically keep track of it, right? If you're not deliberately trying to be trying to bring your head up in that yoke, it's basically impossible that you would end up with your head through the yoke. But to move the analogy along one step, if you have come up with your head through the yoke, and then you go, I'm going to go down for a little tiny breath. I'm going to go underwater for a brief time here, and then I'm going to come right back up and put my head back through this yoke. I'm not going to go down there for 100 years, right? Why are you taking the 5 precepts, for example? You're taking the 5 precepts because if you've taken refuge vows, then every moment of every day, sleeping or waking, you're accumulating the karma continuously of meeting the Dharma again, meeting the Buddha and his disciples again, of encountering and respecting the Sangha again. So you're accumulating the causes that will have you come up with your head through the raft one more time, right? On purpose. On top of that, when you come back up and put your head through the raft again, you need a long life with good health, because if your health is terrible or your life is short, it's going to make your practice way harder, isn't it? Also, it'd be good if you had enough resources to do your practice without having to worry too much about water or food or clothing or the other, shelter, the necessities of life. It would be convenient if you just had all the stuff that you need, all the resources you need to do your practice without having to worry about it. Also, it'd be nice if the people around you weren't too nasty and weren't trying to hurt you too much, and mostly you could rely upon them to do what they said and so forth. And you need the truth. You need people to tell you the truth about stuff, including yourself and the Dharma. Likewise, you need a mind that's incredibly, if possible, really discerning, really sharp, really can cut through the bullshit and get to the truth of things, right? That's the 5 precepts. Don't kill, don't steal, don't commit sexual misconduct, don't lie, don't consume intoxicants. Why? Because you're deliberately creating the circumstances in your next rebirth where you have long life and good health, the resources you need, relationships that aren't horrifically bad, the truth, and a mind that's highly sharp and discerning. 5 precepts. Along with your refuge vows to deeply respect for the rest of your life and see as the highest authority for the rest of your life the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Why? This is the preconditions you need to put your head through the yoke one more time on purpose, rather than falling all the way down to really horrific circumstances and then randomly, if you're lucky, putting your head through the yoke again. If you cultivate ethics and refuge in particular, and also humility really helps, then instead of going down to the bottom of the ocean for 100 years, you come right back up after this rebirth again in the upper realms where we are now, and carry on with your practice right away. That's the idea. Okay. Let's see. Shawshank asks, how is the non-duality of, say, the Vimalakirti Sutra different from the monism of Advaita Vedanta? Okay, one big aspect there. One big aspect there is that non-duality can be in regards to any particular thing that's appearing in experience. So, for example, I was talking with a young Sikh practitioner who was saying that he was using a mirror to generate some concentration, which I suppose is, since he's quite a faithful young man, that must be a practice that's one of the ones they teach in Sikhism, I'm guessing. And so he was using a mirror to generate concentration, and he actually did it. He actually got a little taste of concentration, and his experience went like this: bang. And he saw directly for a few moments that the normal person that he thinks is in between, that basically I own I own my vision, I do, and I'm the one using my vision who's seeing this thing over here. And we're all kind of 3 different things, right? Because if I lost my vision, I would still be here. So I own my vision. I'm the one who's seeing, and I'm seeing stuff. So there are 3 components, and they're all separate. A non-dual experience of vision, it goes like this: bang. and there's no you in between. The you thought was there that owns everything isn't there. And the vision you thought was over here seeing and the thing you thought you were seeing over here go like this. And it's as if the thing that you're seeing is doing the seeing, and the thing that's seeing is the thing that's being seen, and they can't be pulled apart. And all of a sudden, you need religious language and poetry to talk about it, because that's how profound it is in personal experience, right? Even though we can talk, I can talk you through why it will be like that in a matter of minutes, and it's all very logical. The experience itself is quite profound. And so he said he had that experience, and then he got blown out of it because he went, "Where did I go? You know, I stopped existing. I need, you know," and it just blew him right out of the experience. So non-duality, in my understanding, which is a humble sort of beginner's understanding of Advaita Vedanta, my beginner's understanding of Advaita Vedanta is that you pull the external minds into the central mind, and then once the mind has made contact with itself, that you have basically a non-dual experience of consciousness itself. That you're ultimately you're trying to arrive at consciousness itself and abide in the fundamental qualities of consciousness in the absence of other objects of experience. And so, I mean, this is a practice that I teach in a Mahamudra style practice. So this is something that from our perspective is at least one step away from the end goal. And in my understanding, that some Advaita Vedanta schools, and maybe even most Advaita Vedanta schools, they see that as the end, as a non-dual experience of consciousness. You abide in that for long periods of time, and that's the end of the road. That's it. If you do that long enough, you attain moksha, and that's it. You're done. From our perspective, there's still one more step. You don't just rest in Sat Chit Ananda. You need to do some analysis of this consciousness that is, and take it one step further than this. And there are some Advaita practitioners that agree with that, actually. There are a couple different schools that I've seen of Advaita Vedanta in particular that like Nagarjuna a lot. And Nagarjuna is talking more at the level of what you find in the Vimalakirti Sutra, where he's saying, okay, once, and again, this is taught in the Mahamudra tradition that I teach also, once you've made contact with Sat Chit Ananda, once you've made contact with a type of consciousness that seems self-existent, then a wonderful description in one of the Mahamudra texts, like a fish swimming around in a lucid pond, you investigate the nature of the meditating mind and look for the meditator. Look for the meditating mind. Where is the mind that is meditating exactly? Where is that being that seems self-existent, that is doing the activity of meditating? And as you swim around and look in this completely still, lucid pond of awareness with no, with no outside objects appearing, as you swim around in this awareness, looking for that meditator in all the places it could be, looking for that meditating mind in all the places it could be, and you don't find some essentially or inherently existent entity, when you find that, you rest in, this is important, you rest in non-dual awareness of that. Bang. You see it? So now you're generating single-pointed concentration on the fundamental nature of that consciousness in a non-dual state with the awareness of the fundamental nature of that consciousness. So rather than simply abiding in a non-dual awareness of awareness, you investigate the nature of awareness, realize or recognize the way that it exists, and then abide in a state of single-pointed concentration on, in a non-dual state, the nature of how it exists, instead of just abiding on the awareness. So that would be, in my opinion, the fundamental difference between some Advaita Vedanta schools and what you're doing in Buddhism with non-duality. I think, in my opinion, and it is just my opinion, of course, but I think that we agree with you on everything right up to that point. You know, we agree with you, like, you've got to go to the nature of, you've got to get to consciousness. And when you get there, it's going to seem self-existent. If it didn't seem self-existent, then all you would have to do is get to a really subtle state of mind. But the Buddha started there, didn't he? The Buddha went to two basically Hindu teachers or Vedic teachers or Upanishadic teachers, and he trained with them in the two subtlest jhanas, formless jhanas, that are beyond simply abiding on consciousness. There are subtler ones than this that you can do beyond simply abiding on the nature of the let's call it the conventional nature of awareness. Beyond this, even subtler than this. And he said, no, this doesn't do it. You have to investigate the nature of these things using sort of like we described in the Mahamudra tradition, sort of this lucid fish, this little fish swimming around inside and looking at it and looking at how it exists. And then when you find out how it exists, then you abide in non-dual concentration on that. And that is what creates moksha eventually. That, along with merit and good karma, right? This is what does it. So that I would say is the big difference. Okay. Juzan asks, what percentage of the path is or can be physical? Qigong or Tsalong? Can these take you all the way? Why do some lineages keep physical practice so secret? To be honest, I think things like Qigong, if it's a real lineage, because there's a lot of bullshit Qigong out there. Let me preface this by saying I have talked to practitioners who have spent a huge amount of time in Asia training with Asian teachers in, let's call it sort of the native format for learning internal Chinese martial arts, Chinese health arts, Qigong, Neigong, all of these sorts of practices, okay? And they say the charlatanism, the fake teachers, the bullshit teachers, it's even worse when you get into India, China, Malaysia, Cambodia, blah, 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 blah. There's even more fakes than in the West. And so if you've been around and you've looked at the West, it's already pretty bad here. So here's the thing. My opinion, okay? My opinion. I think these things can take you a really, really far way down the path. I think that training physically and then transitioning from the physical to, let's call it, the subtle physical, the sub-physical, the energy layer. I hate this word energy, but everybody uses it. The vitality layer, vital forces, that going through this process from most obvious to less obvious to consciousness, and then from consciousness to the subtle substances associated with consciousness and so forth, that this transition is extremely helpful and probably doesn't need to be hidden behind as many layers of empowerment and so forth as it is in Buddhism. That being said, I also don't think that the Buddhists should get rid of those barriers. I think it's extremely important that if you've taken vows to not say something, not do something, not reveal something, that you don't do that. And that's an unpopular opinion because there's a lot of tantric people, for example, that basically have taken all sorts of stuff where they took vows to all the Buddhas, all the bodhisattvas, that I'll never do this. I'll never reveal this. I'll never give it to people without empowerment. And then they broke that vow. I mean, I find that absolutely horrifying personally. Here's an alternative. Just as an example, if Oates, if you wouldn't mind, if you're still in the room, if you would put the Lohan Palm link in the chat, just as a sort of counter example to this. So there are lineages, in particular coming through China, Shaolin Temple, some of the Taoist lineages, that basically have all of the tantric stuff that you would get in Buddhism, as far as I can tell, that they have all of this technology, let's call it, but it's not hidden behind empowerment. So here's the thing. If you wanted a version of this stuff to teach in public, learn a version that you don't vow to all sentient beings, all Buddhas, all bodhisattvas, all Shravakas, all arhats, that you will never reveal to people that don't have empowerment. That's an option. You understand what I mean? Like, you've made a pretty heavy promise to not do something, and there's another version of this available that has all of this stuff out there in the open, basically in ways that don't break your vows. Why not do that? Why not do that instead? So like I say sometimes, for some people, look, if you're the type of person that doesn't want to take tantric empowerment, but basically wants to know what is all this extra stuff that you get in the tantric version of the path, train in something like 18 Lohan Palm. If you train in Lohan Palm, which hopefully that got put in the, yeah, it's down there at the bottom of the chat now. That system has all the physical stuff, and then it has all of the vital forces, the chi layer, all of the energy layer, except not bullshit energy, but actual, a couple thousand years of people working with the subtlest parts of their being stuff. And then from there, it transitions you into working with your mind, training and meditation. And then it transitions you into Neigong. And Neigong, internal alchemy, is, I think, it makes it sound much more mystical than it is basically about learning how to work with the subtlest elements of stuff that make you up as a being. And by the time you get to doing Neigong, it's extremely tactile. It's like feeling your own body. It's not at all vague or whatever. I don't know how to put this in a way that really explains it, but I've said this on live before. I've done Qigong practices. I've done Neigong practices. And as a skeptical academic-y minded person, I wanted to know if these things are physically real or if they're just psychologically real. So there's a couple possibilities. If you take your finger, for example, for some of you this won't work, but for some of you it will. So if you take your thumb and put it right in the middle of your vision, right? So this is the middle of my left eye, and you keep your eyes pointed forward, but you slowly move it to the left. At some point, there it is for me, you'll hit a place where it seems like your thumb gets really gray or disappears. And the reason for this is that on your retina, on the back of your eye, where the nerve comes in, there's actually a bald spot with nothing that detects light there. And your brain just fills in the hole. So there's two holes in your vision. They're like right here in the middle of your vision, right? There's just two holes there where you don't see anything at all. And your mind just fills it in with what it expects to be there. So our mind fills in things in reality to try to help us be more functional. So it's possible, for example, that the feeling of subtle energies and movement of stuff through a weird channel system in the body, it's possible that that's like for lack of a better term, sort of like a hack that your mind uses to give you information about something happening in your physical body, let's say, that isn't otherwise accessible to you, right? But that it doesn't actually represent a real thing in the way that it looks or feels. That's a possibility. And so when I started doing these practices myself, I wanted to know, okay, does it just feel like there are substances moving through the body that aren't, strictly speaking, physical, that they're somehow sub-physical? Because they have done tests on Qigong masters, and when they project Qi from their hand or whatever, there's no electrons or neutrons or protons that are leaving their hand. So it's not the physical stuff that we know of, at least. It could be physical, but it's not part of the standard model at this point. So I just did some tests. I did tests with people that didn't know I was doing anything. The one that I sometimes say, I was in a circumstance with my wife once where I wanted to know, okay, I've built up a huge amount of energy in the lower field, in the lower basin, and I can move it around when I want to. So is that just a feeling that there's a substance there that I can move around, or is it really a substance that does things in the real world, right? It's an open question. Certainly, it creates different kinds of experience. It can create very subtle types of consciousness. Maybe not for me, but my teachers say that it will eventually. And all of that could be true, and it still might not be, let's say, a real physical substance in the way it seems to be, or a sub physical substance in the way it seems to be. That's a possibility, right? Okay, fine. I would be fine with that. No problem. As long as, even though it's sort of like if it was fake in a sense, if it's not what it seems, but it still produces these effects, no problem, right? Great. That is still worth doing. So, to test whether or not it's that kind of psychological thing or if it's a real thing, I was in a situation where I was giving my wife a foot rub one night, and I took every bit of this energy that I could. I mean, a huge amount, every bit that I could, and I ejected it through my hand into my wife's foot. And I wasn't even looking at her at the time. We were watching television or something. And she, out of nowhere, she goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Why?" Because I didn't want to suggest anything, because then she would potentially sort of, how we are, you kind of fill it in. And she goes, "It felt like something just ran up my leg and into my body, and then it hit the top of my head, and now I feel dizzy." And I went, "Cool." You know what I mean? Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Well, that to me, it's not definitive, but that's an indication. That's a hint that maybe this substance that feels like a physical substance but can't be measured by normal instruments, at least at this point, that's an indication that this kind of substance, even though it's not accounted for in the standard model, as far as I can tell, and as far as the research says so far, that it really is something that you can eject from your body. And even if you don't tell somebody else you're doing it, it will create real effects in the physical world. Right? That's pretty cool. And I don't like to talk about these things on live, so I'm not going to give you specific examples, but I've had my teachers do things that are even much, much weirder than that. That convinced me these are not just psychological things. It's not physical particles based on the research that's been done so far, but it's a real thing that can do things in the real world. Okay, so having said that, there are, roughly speaking, according to all these models, there are kind of 3 layers that make up your being. You have your physical layer, you have a sub-physical layer made of this kind of stuff we were just talking about, and then you have a consciousness layer, and that consciousness layer is non-physical, but it has very, very, very subtle substances associated with it that are even subtler than this energy layer that we were just discussing now. And so in Taoism, they call that layer, and in the Shaolin tradition, they call that layer shun. Shun. And you could translate it spirit, consciousness, all sorts of terms. But shun is this subtlest, very subtle types of consciousness, along with the very subtlest sorts of energies or whatever that come along with them. So when you do these practices, they are extremely tangible, extremely real in terms of their feeling physical effects. And as you gain more control over each layer, the body, the energy layer, the Shen layer, the Shaolin system would take you through the physical layer, it's the most obvious, into the Qi layer, which is a spectrum of things, actually. It includes really sort of subtle relationships through the body, and it includes an energy layer. And then this transitions into consciousness, where you work on meditation in the way you would normally be familiar with. And then finally, that transitions into Neigong, where you're basically trying to trigger the very subtlest types of consciousness. And that, as far as I can tell, is the same process that you would use in the Buddhist tantras, for example. So if, to finally land the plane, I'm sure none of you have held the entire conversation in your heads, but to finally land the plane of the whole thought that took me all that time to get out, if you wanted to do the tantric thing without doing the tantric thing, you could do the Shaolin thing, like being taught by Neil Ripsky, where you go through body, energy layer, mind, subtlest mind, and the energy layer associated with that subtlest mind, right? This is the flow chart. And it's all there, not hidden behind any empowerments in the Taoist systems and in the, as far as I can tell, also in the Shaolin system, at least the one that Neil has, right? Yeah, so quite interesting. I would I would encourage it greatly. Again, I think these practices are absolutely incredibly beneficial, and even more so if you're a layperson, incredibly beneficial, because if you transform your body and make it more like the result, and then you transform the energy system and make it more like the result, then by the time you're training your mind, and you've been training your mind all through the body and the energy layer anyway, but by the time you're actually training your mind, the degree to which you can fall out of the state you're trying to create is less, because you transformed the body and the energy system along with and before you started trying to make the mind do anything in particular. And then if you happen to be training your mind all along anyway, all the better. Everything will happen faster. You see? So I think these three work together: the body layer, the vital energies layer, and the mind layer. And then ultimately, if you have the right practices, that leads to the subtlest layers of your being, which is basically what Tantra is about at the end of the day. And the Negong, or not Negong, Neidan systems have that technology too, not just the Buddhist tantras. Yeah, so I actually can't recommend it any more highly than that. I know us Buddhists have a flat, boring affect, but to say that I'm excited that Neil is willing to put all this down on paper and train people in it and make a series that'll probably be a 6, 8, 10-year series of teachings to document the entire system, I can't be more excited than I am. It's just absolutely unbelievable that we're going to have access to this, and hopefully that a few people will take it on and it won't disappear. Okay. Simple Light asks, do you know... Oh, actually, let me put in the bottom of the chat. I'm going to do it on this screen so that I don't lose my place. First 50 year. So for those who are interested in the Lohan course, that code I just gave you, first 50, the first 50 people that sign up for the monthly subscription to Neil's course will get half off the first 3 months using first 50. If you sign up for the year long and you just pay for a year up front, you're already getting 1 month free on the course. But that code, first 50 year, means that the first 50 people who sign up for a year-long subscription also get the first 3 months half off. So in effect, you get 2.5 free months if you buy the whole year outright before you even start, right? So in any case, if any of you want to sign up for the Lohan course, you're welcome to use those links, and you're welcome to use the link in the chat, and you're welcome to use those codes until they run out. Okay, back to the questions. Juzan, just to say one last thing, there are great yogis. It was either Padmasambhava or Padampa Sangye who said, basically, from a tantric perspective, that they can't imagine or they can't fathom completing the path without the physical aspects of the training. This is how important it's seen to be. And when you talk about doing all of the physical yogas and stuff that you find in the Tibetan tradition, for example, some of the commitments for those practices are 2 hours a day of just the physical aspect of the practice before you've done the meditations. So that's a lot of your day, right? So, I mean, I think the physical part is radically less sort of is not emphasized nearly enough in a modern context. We do the meditation thing and we don't worry about the rest. And you can do it that way, of course, but if you're turning your body, your vital energy system, and your mind all in the same direction, then things happen much more quickly and the results are more stable. Okay. Simple Light asks, are there living Buddhas? I was actually just talking with someone who's coming on the podcast. Lama Karma is a Western gentleman who's completed two 3-year retreats in the tantric tradition. One, I believe, was in the Kagyu tradition. The other, I believe, was in the Nyingma tradition. And now he's a layperson living as a layperson, married with a daughter. And so it makes him a very interesting case to sort of talk to, right? Because he's done extremely intensive practice for long periods. And now, for lack of a better term, although, he's living out a retreat center at the moment. When I talked to him, he said he's going to be moving soon and moving out of the retreat center, but is living, roughly speaking, a conventional life with married, a child. Has to provide an income and all of this stuff that we deal with as normal people. So he has said, for example, and I tend to agree. You know, the Buddhist tradition says that it's possible to attain enlightenment in a single lifetime. And the Buddhist tradition also says that you could, for example, if you were on your 7th or 15th lifetime as a human, and you had been training in Tantra for 3 lifetimes, 7 lifetimes, 10 lifetimes, 15 lifetimes, that that last one, would be the last one where you weren't an enlightened being, right? This is a possibility in the full range of possibilities. And there are beings who have already been at it that long, right? I mean, even just in Buddhist history, we know that have been great tantric yogis from at least the 7th century. So there have been plenty of generations between here and there for even the sort of dumb practitioners who need 15 lifetimes, probably like me, right? Even the slowest horse should be getting to the point where things are happening by now. So are there teachers that directly affirm that? I think there probably are. Would they say that on camera or randomly to a group of people? Probably not. But he's of the opinion that, that he's trained with a fully enlightened being in the course of one of his 3-year retreats, if not both of his 3-year retreats. And, how do I say? If, according to Buddhism, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, they emanate as ordinary looking beings so that they can lead us and help us. Because the time has passed where a Buddha emanates as a wheel-turning Buddha. That time is now past. So they have to appear now as beings who look normal and seem to have problems and faults and other things, because they couldn't possibly appear as a perfect-looking being for us at this time. The karmic season for that appearing as a perfect being is now past. So because of this, there are enlightened beings, there are Buddhas who appear now, but they appear in such a way, again, it's sort of like the thing I was doing earlier, right? Where I can look angry if I want to. I can talk in a way that makes you think I'm really pissed off, but I'm not. Right? So I'm not a great being. I'm just a normal person and I can do this. So great beings, great bodhisattvas and Buddhas, they appear normal. It even says in one sutra that Buddhas and bodhisattvas will emanate as religious leaders who aren't Buddhist, because they want to help all beings, not just Buddhists. So there could be Catholic priests There could be Eastern Orthodox monks. There could be Hindus. There could be Muslim saints. There could be all sorts of beings all over the place that are actually Buddhas or Bodhisattvas that are trying to benefit beings in that particular way. So, yeah, there has to be beings like that because of what those beings are. Now, whether or not they appear exactly the way that we would hope or expect is a different question. Okay, next question. Chaos talking about accumulating good and bad karma and what effect do they have. So in generally with karmic theory, good karma is something that you will experience as positive results, right? A karma was positive when you will enjoy the results when that karma comes to fruition. Furthermore, at least in my way of talking about this, merit, which is a type of good karma, merit is not only going to be something you enjoy, it's something that pushes you further down the path or gives you access at least to things that drive you further down the path. So merit is like momentum that's momentum towards the truth, I suppose you could say. Now, negative karma is when it ripens, when it reoccurs in the future, right? Then it occurs or ripens or reoccurs as something you won't enjoy, something you won't like at all. So this is the main difference between positive and negative karma. It's not like someone sitting out there going, "Oh, this one's good, that one's bad," right? It's that the way when those results occur for you, you won't enjoy it, or you will enjoy it, or you'll enjoy it and it will send you further down the path. And then there are mixed karmas where they have elements of both, where you may have experiences you don't like that drive you further down the path. So there are mixed karmas also. Okay, Brian asks, where did the Kasina meditations come from? I'm not sure which sutta they come from, but by the time we get to the, what is it, 3rd century? Maybe 2nd or 3rd century, the Path of Purification, Venerable Buddhaghosa, right? Or Buddhaghosa, right? Then they're being talked about at some level of detail. Earth Wombat asking about a question from earlier. Okay. So I answered the one about relationships. Drop it in the bottom of the chat. Drop it in the bottom of the chat again, Wombat. I'm not sure what question I missed. Okay. My therapist recommended loving kindness to deal with childhood trauma and hatred. It's been exhilarating. So, quite a bit of what's called loving kindness practice, Shawshank, is actually goodwill practice. And goodwill towards other beings. Okay, good, Wombat, good. Goodwill towards other beings is positive, it's exhilarating, it's unbelievable, it's incredible. It's a practice that's worth doing, but it's not metta. So, one thing that's somehow happened in Buddhist history is that a lot of stuff that isn't metta now has the name metta. And I think especially in secular mindfulness communities, and there's a couple of other ones I'm not going to name by name because I don't like doing that, but it's not metta that they're doing. It's goodwill. How do you know? Well, what is ill will? Anybody? Tell me in the bottom of the chat. What is ill will? So what is ill will? Anybody? Can anybody tell me? So is the ill will is basically the desire to harm others, the desire that they, yeah, wanting the worst, cursing, that you want others to do poorly, right? You want bad things to happen to them, or you want to do bad things to them. Most of the stuff that's taught as quote unquote metta in a modern context is goodwill. Now define goodwill: wanting good things to happen to others, wanting the best thing to happen to others. You know, instead of cursing someone, hoping the best for them, blessing them, in other words, right? That's goodwill, which is good. You know, goodwill is a fantastic practice, but it's not metta. That's not what metta is. That's not how metta is defined. Does anybody know the definition of metta? So metta is the desire for all sentient beings to have happiness and the causes of happiness. And it's only full-blown metta when you know what happiness is, when you know what the causes of happiness are, when you know what all sentient beings means, when you accept that the type of happiness and causes of happiness being described in Buddhism are a real thing, right? And that you have spent a lot of time equalizing all beings so that you can generate a feeling that you genuinely, from the bottom of your heart, from your bone marrow, not from the surface of your skin and from the tips of your lips, but from your bones and the marrow inside your bones, deeply desire, a burning, passionate, intense desire that fills you up completely and overwhelms you, that all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness without exception, leaving out no sentient being whatsoever. Utterly overwhelming, filling you up entirely. And that mind, that mental state is unbelievably rare and difficult to generate. It's not easy. It is not a casual endeavor. You're not going to do it on a random Wednesday by reading a few words on a piece of paper. You have to train for quite a while and work really hard at all of the component parts that build up what that mind is to even get what's called a constructed version of metta. To say nothing about a spontaneous occurrence of metta in your mind where you didn't intend for it to happen and you didn't spend 3 hours going through all the steps and stages that lead to metta. It just happened by itself because you've trained in it. Spontaneous metta, even harder than this. And that's real metta for the first time. When it happens when you weren't trying to make it happen and it's full blown, that's metta. That's actual metta. Before that, you can have constructed metta by doing a lot of work to build up all the component parts of what makes the mental state of metta occur. And according to the great saints, it takes a long time. It takes a lot of work. So just thinking to yourself, may all beings be free from suffering, or not free from suffering, but may all beings not have war. May they have clothing. May they have food. May they have water. May things turn out well for them. I really hope that all beings get the very best of everything and that they don't have to engage in conflict and blah, 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 blah. That's goodwill. And goodwill is really fantastic, but it's not metta. And it's important to know that it's not metta, because you have to know that you don't have something if you want to develop it eventually, don't you? If you think you're already the strongest man in the world, you're not going to go train to become the strongest man in the world, are you? But if you encounter someone stronger than you, you go, oh, I've got a ways to go now. I've got some work to do. I better hit the gym. Metta is unbelievably profound. and rare and difficult, and it's not goodwill. And I have personally, I have a strong feeling that we should stop calling things that aren't meta. We should stop calling them meta because people won't pursue meta because they think they already have it by doing goodwill practice, and they don't have it. Even though goodwill practice is excellent and it can support your training for meta, it's not meta. Okay. Okay. Good. And Shawshank, don't think I'm saying it's bad. Don't think I'm saying that it's useless. Don't think that I'm saying it's not good and that it won't help you. It will help you. Goodwill will help you. Goodwill is fantastic. Goodwill is worth doing. It's just not meta, right? Okay. Do monks drink black coffee? Yes, they do. They can. So Brett says that doing 2 hours of meditation increased sad feelings. So something that's not talked about very much in modern meditation circles is, well, actually, just real quick, my friends. So let me do my little commercial break as I want to do because I haven't done one yet. So my YouTube channel, I don't have ads and I don't charge for anything. Anything that I teach, you can find for free somewhere. And I also spend, as some of you guys know, I spend a lot of time on the phone with people doing video calls, helping them with their practice. I do whatever I can to help people actually be successful in all of this. And I do it all for free. Having said that, I can't do that for the 70 or so hours a week that I'm putting in at the moment, and also have a full-time job at the same time. So if you're getting value out of this and you want to help me continue working 70, sometimes 100 hours a week, helping people in this way, delivering this kind of information, answering people's questions, doing phone calls to help people with their practice, all of this sort of thing, I have to have donations from the community or I can't do it, because I do have to keep the lights on and pay for groceries and all that sort of stuff. Also, there's still a couple things I need to upgrade, including this microphone, which, as one person pointed out, doesn't work very well. So in order to deliver an experience that gets rid of any barriers that might stop people from being benefited, including the fact that I sound shitty on this microphone, right? I need to have the equipment that's required so that, people aren't turned off before they've even gotten anything beneficial. I hate it. I hate it that the world is like that, but it is like that. So unfortunately, that also requires money. And so if you find this beneficial, please do. The PayPal's down there, the Venmo is down there. That's the best way to send funds through because they have very little fees. That then most of the money will go to me. And I think that's what both sides are intending if you're sending a donation through. GoFundMe takes a small amount, and you can slide the slider down to the smallest amount on GoFundMe. So that would be a good option too, especially because they have a recurring subscription option if you wanted to donate from month to month, for example. Finally, I have a course on Skool, Skool, where I'm training people a bit more hardcore. So all of my Skool materials are also available for free on my YouTube playlist called the Meditation and Mindfulness course, something like this. It's all the same material. But I'm building a community on Skool of people that want to support me in teaching everyone else for free, want to support each other in training in meditation and Buddhist practice, but mostly meditation. And also financially, once we have about 100 people in that course, then we can start sponsoring people to go into retreat. So, for example, for a lot of people, it costs, besides lost income, it costs, let's call it somewhere between $300 and $1,000 to go into retreat for a couple of weeks because you weren't working, because you had to travel, because you had to pay for the retreat, and so on and so forth, right? If there's 100 of us for 10 US dollars each, we can send someone into retreat for 2 weeks. How fantastic is that? So if we can send 2 people a month into retreat, then over a 4-year period between the 100 of us, we can send everyone into the community into retreat for a couple of weeks, which is fantastic, right? So all of us who might not have been able to do 2 weeks of retreat ever in our life will now be able to do it because we care about each other and because we want to support each other doing serious practice. How fantastic is that, right? So this is what I'm trying to build with the school community. People who want to train hardcore, people who want to train with me in the stuff I'm teaching, people who want to support each other in terms of, let's say, moral support, and people who want to support each other in terms of financial support. A very reasonable amount of money every year to support all of us being able to do retreat from time to time. That's longer than a week, let's say, right? So that's what I'm doing with the school course. And then the last thing, of course, is the Lohan course. So the Lohan course I'm building with Neil Ripsky, a Shaolin lineage holder. And if you were here earlier in the stream, he teaches the physical aspect and the vital forces, the energy aspect that I don't teach. I do those practices. I do those practices a lot. I'm doing those practices about 2 hours a day at the moment, but I don't teach them because you have to know a huge amount to teach them. You only have to know a small amount to do them. So if you're interested in the physical and energetic layer of training and meditation that I don't teach, and you'd like to add a Buddhist, basically, a Buddhist layer of those practices onto you, what you're doing, instead of, for example, like a Hindu yoga layer, you'd rather have the Buddhist version, let's say, go to the Lohan course, and you can use the codes that I put in the chat. For what it's worth, since I'm working with Neil, I get a small portion of the funds that go through that course also, so you'd also be benefiting what I'm doing with everyone for free. You see? So those are the ways that you could support the channel and make sure that this goes on. So that, sorry, I think I got cut out there, but so that people will continue benefiting from this for years to come. Okay, looks like we're getting close to the bottom of the chat in terms of questions. I'm going to do a lightning round because I have a phone call starting at 11:30 with Neil Ripsky, the man himself, the man, the myth, the legend. So for those who have been waiting for an answer, I apologize if my answer will be a bit brief, but I'm going to be doing more of these now that I've gotten to a more stable place with the Lohan course. My time will be diverted back over to doing these kinds of things. All right, so Donald Burke's question will be the last one, and I'm gonna do a bit of a speed round getting down to that question. Okay, so Brett asks, why am I getting more sad now that I'm doing 2 hours of practice a day? Okay, here's something people need to know. The reason it's not good to meditate for long periods of time before you know all of the problems that come up in meditation is that you're absolutely right, Brett. If you meditate for a long time, hours a day, and you're meditating in a state of mind that is what is called in the classical text dull or lax, a lax or dull state of mind, you will get depressed. Ta-da! Not only will you get depressed, you'll get more stupid. You won't be able to figure stuff out. Your mind will be foggy. Your mind will be dull. It won't do what you want. And there's a solution for that. There are solutions for this. There are ways of counteracting that problem. But if you don't know what they are, then you will be slower, dumber, sadder, less capable, and you won't know why. Especially because you're working so hard to be a good meditator, right? You're going, why isn't my mind working better than it used to? Okay? So in the way that I train people in meditation, the techniques that I teach take you through the practices in a certain order so that even if I don't tell you what the big problems are in meditation, and I will tell you what they are as you're going through stuff, but even if I didn't tell you, the type of technique that I'm teaching you counteracts the problems you're going to have in meditation counteracts the problems you're going to have in meditation basically as they occur in the process. So even without knowing what they are, you counteract the problems and you don't have to deal with them. So the problem that you're very likely dealing with is called laxity. And laxity is when your mind gets distracted by the calmness of itself. You're training in concentration, the mind gets very calm. It gets distracted by that calmness instead of observing the object that you intended to observe, and then it gets dumber, and it can get depressed. So the way you fix that is you could do standing body scanning, which will keep the mind fresh. You could do walking meditation. Interesting that I put that as foundations 2 and 3. Right after we make your mind really calm, now we have you walking and standing, which makes your mind fresh. And then interesting, once we've made your mind extremely calm and a little bit fresh, now we're doing Mahamudra practices that make your mind extremely fresh and bright and lucid. Interesting, right? There may be a reason that I'm doing that. The reason is that once the mind is calm, it will get dull and lax, and that will make you depressed, stupid, and not unperceptive, which doesn't help. So you need either you need to apply antidotes within that practice you're doing, or you need to do a different practice. Okay, I've got to go lightning round. That is an excellent question, Brett, and I'm sorry that you're dealing with that, because it sucks to work really hard and then for things to get worse, you know? To fix that, do standing body scanning and do walking meditation and do visual Mahamudra. So do the Mahamudra practice that we do using vision. Okay. Advaita Vedanta text teaches that just as dream worlds appear entirely real while asleep, our waking world is also a manifestation of our ignorance. Isn't that mind only? Not quite. So mind-only Chittamatra view says that the world is real, the mind is real, both the mind, the object being observed, and the object doing the observing come from a single karmic seed, almost like 2 leaves on a sprout. So when a sprout comes up, 2 leaves come off, right? When a karmic seed ripens, 2 leaves come off. One is the thing being experienced, the other is the thing doing the experiencing. Both are real. Both are coming from a seed from the storehouse consciousness, or just from the place where karmic seeds are stored. So the world is real, according to mind only, but we see it in a way that it is not the way it exists. That's the problem. Earth is talking about chi types of mind, super hearing, super seeing. Yeah, I mean those are common side effects. If you train your mind in stuff and you involve yourself in those communities, they talk about clairvoyance almost casually. They're sort of like, well, yeah, of course you develop clairvoyance. This is just a normal thing that happens, and it's not even the point. It's like a side effect of what of what happens. Yeah, fair enough. Okay. Are there any meditation techniques that can help with gender issues? I'm a guy who often cross-dresses and presents feminine. Sometimes I have an issue accepting my identity. I think it can, actually, because, you know, as you get deeper into the components that make up your being, your mind, your central mind isn't actually male or female. This is why I think quite a few deities and things, when you see the tantric deities and so forth, you see them in union, right? Because the fundamental nature of mind isn't male or female, but could present as either male or female, right? Depending on what's needed. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a pathway there towards sort of figuring yourself out, especially if you have sort of a more and more insight into how the layers on top of that more fundamental mind, more fundamental experience, how the layers are built up, because you have awareness now of a more fundamental layer. That's definitely going to give you more insight into even, let's call it, your sort of ordinary personality, right? Okay. Kasinas come from the Abhidharma. Okay, fair enough. Um, Brian, goodwill practice leads to metta? No, not necessarily. No, not necessarily. Goodwill can just remain goodwill. It won't ever graduate into metta unless you do all of the other practices that generate metta. It can support that practice because it's headed the same way, but it never naturally develops into that. You have to equalize all beings in your mind, and then you have to spend a lot of time realizing, for example, how kind they all have been, and therefore how they should be precious to your mind. So not only are they equal, but they should be, each one of them individually, down to the fleas, down to the worms, down to the ladybugs, down to the hell beings, down to the each being in the spirit realm, into the beings between realms, into the highest gods. Every single being is incredibly, 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 incredibly precious. That each one of you is incredibly, incredibly precious. Until that until that feeling is completely overwhelming. And that feeling that not only are all beings equal, but they've been so unbelievably kind for infinite time. They've sacrificed over and over again for your benefit. Your mother carried you in her womb for 9 months. She rejoiced when you kicked her from the inside, when you caused her pain. She couldn't sit how she wanted. She couldn't eat how she wanted. She couldn't drink how she wanted. She couldn't move how she wanted for months. And then you ripped out of her body, and she rejoiced that you were so strong. And every being has been your kind mother over and over and over again. And they've been your closest mentor. They've been your little brother. They've been your big brother. They've been your little sister, your big sister. They've been your mentors. I said that. They've been your teachers. They've been so incredibly kind over and over and over again. And when that feeling is so strong that it raises the hair on your arms, that it brings tears to your eyes, that it's stronger than the most powerful lust you've ever felt. It's stronger than the most powerful anger you've ever felt. It's stronger than the most powerful jealousy you've ever felt. Fills you up completely, overwhelming. Then it gives birth somewhere in there. It gives birth to the feeling, I really want them to be happy. These beings who are so precious, so unbelievably kind and precious. I you know, I hope they have happiness in the causes of happiness. Not only this, I'll do whatever it takes within my capability, and I'll develop the capabilities to benefit all beings in this way, to bring them the causes of happiness and the causes of happiness. That feeling that's willing to move mountains, that's willing to do absolutely whatever it takes personally in order to bring about the happiness and causes of happiness for all beings. Your kind mothers, your kind fathers. That doesn't come about by just sitting around thinking, I hope they have sweaters when the winter comes. I hope that they always have food. I hope that they always have water. I hope that there's no war. Goodwill doesn't lead to that. It can support it, developing it, but there's a whole process you need to put yourself through to generate the state of mind I was just describing. And it doesn't come about just by doing a bunch of goodwill practice. It just doesn't. They're not causally connected. They're supportive of each other, but they're not causally connected. All right? Okay. Donal Burke. I've been a Zen student 7 years and have a deep interest in Zen, other religions. Would you recommend doing a PhD? I don't have much structure on my Zen path. Yeah. I mean, if you're interested in academic-y stuff, not a lot of people know this, but actually, Chan, which gave birth to Zen, and actually Zen also. I don't know. Hold on. Stay right there. Okay. Does everybody remember that guy Dogen, Venerable Dogen, who said, supposedly, according to all the Western guys, said the only thing you need to do is just sit there, like just sit there, and that's the whole thing. Why did he write all of this? Couldn't he have been a little more brief if the only thing to do was just sit there? Like he could have said that in one sentence, right? Why did he write all this? What's the point of this? What is the point of this giant, extremely scholarly dense material with example after example and huge numbers of references that apparently, by the way, Dogen had memorized and could verbally easily recite from memory all of these sutras? What's the point of all that? If Zen is just shut up and sit there and do nothing, yeah, that's the Shobogenzo. And Dogen's extensive record. Somebody tell me, please, if Zen is not a scholarly tradition, what the hell is the point of all these things that the founder of the biggest Zen school in the world, what's the point of all this shit that he wrote? Because he could have just said, sit there and do nothing. That's it, right? Like we could say that in about 2 seconds, and then you're off to the races. What is the point of all this? Actually, Chan and Zen are extremely scholarly, dense kinds of traditions. And it was considered to be in the, I think it's the Lenji school or Leijin school in China. It's considered to be an advanced practice to do, for example, the just sitting thing. You do that at the end of a long career of merit building, purification, ritual, refuge, blah, 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 blah. All of your academic studies, all of the interactions with all of your teachers. Then, after like 15, 20 years, you start doing a lot of just sitting practice. And that practice begins to unlock all of the work you've done with this kind of material. And there comes the phone call from my friend. Okay, yep, that was the last question I was going to answer on this call. I love you guys so much. I have to go. And this, by the way, this is the other one. Hakuan Zenji. Who's that? That's Rinzai. Why is the Rinzai guy, the guy who says you need to sit for 12 hours a day and do nothing else, why does he have a big ass book? And this is one of like 20 books that he has. Why? Okay. So yes, if you want to get a PhD in Zen stuff, you absolutely can. It's extremely valuable to do so. And I would also recommend go find a really good Zen teacher who's properly trained in Chan or Zen or Korean Zen. I would say actually Korean Zen, and if you can find one that's not like just a plant from the Chinese government, like a proper Chan teacher, probably Chan and Korean Zen have better stuff going on at the moment than Japanese because of reasons. It's not a universal rule, but it's just my humble view on the situation. Okay.